pledge allegiance
pledge allegiance
to the
to the flag of the United States of America
and to
and to the republic for which it
stands,
stands, one
one
nation,
nation,
under
under
God,
God, indivisible,
indivisible,
with
with
liberty
liberty and
and
justice
justice
for all.
for all. Please be seated. Madam Clerk, would you please read the special meeting notice followed by a roll call?
Members of the Town Board, special Town Board meeting Thursday, June 3rd, 2021, 10 a.m. Please be advised that pursuant to Section 62 of Town Law, a special Town Board meeting will be held via video conferencing on Thursday, June 3rd, 2021 at 10 a.m. for the purpose of considering the following: Home Rule Request Resolution in support of Assembly Bill A
How you doing?
6668.
Charles, you're not muted.
Sorry.
-B and Senate Bill S 5985B as it relates to the discontinuance of parkland. Jay Schneiderman, Supervisor, Town of Southampton, dated June 1st, 2021. Supervisor Schneiderman,
Present.
Councilwoman Lofstad,
Here.
Councilman Martell,
Here.
Councilman Bouvier,
Here.
Councilman Scavone.
Present.
All right. So we're going to start today's meeting with public portion. We're on Zoom. So is there, Charles, is there anyone who is indicating they want to be heard in public portion?
I have no hands.
If anybody wants to be heard in public portion, please indicate so by clicking the raise hand icon.
There is no one.
All right, I'll make a motion to close public portion.
Second.
Okay, seconded by, I think, Councilman Bouvier. All in favor?
Aye.
All right. All right. And I don't think there were any walk-ons, correct, on this? So with just the one resolution.
There are some.
There were add-ons for the agenda for next week, but not walk-ons. Correct, Sunday? Is there a walk-on?
Excuse me? Oh, I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. You know what? I just received a notice of add-ons. So that's for our next
Yes.
discussion on the draft agenda. My apologies.
Okay, so there is one resolution before us. It's Resolution 577 of 2021. It's a home rule request resolution in support of Assembly Bill A 6668-B and Senate Bill S 5985B as it relates to the discontinuance of parkland. This has to do with land in Hampton Bays. We had already taken care of this, but the acreage of the parcel being alienated or cleansed of the parkland restrictions was incorrect in the Assembly and Senate bill. So Kathleen, let me kick it to you to give any additional information on that.
Good morning, board members. Thank you, Mr. Supervisor. Yes, basically the Senate and the Assembly bills had to be revised to correct the description of, as the supervisor indicated, the parcel that's being discontinued to make sure that it included the entirety of the parcel, which is 153 West Montauk Highway. So the version that you have now before you, version B, is the correct description.
Okay. And I think we have gone over this, but this basically, when we have done comprehensive planning as a town for downtown Hampton Bays, when we did the corridor study, we meaning town board, even prior to most of us, when we did the rezoning of downtown Hampton Bays, all of it, as we try to attract commercial investment into downtown and revitalize downtown, there has been a strong recommendation that an additional route be created along the railroad tracks that would allow vehicles to be able to get to the beach or get to people's homes or wherever it might be without having to go through downtown, take some of the traffic out of downtown. And that, has been a desire or goal of the town in several adopted plans. And we are trying to figure out how to do that, how to make that happen. It's positive for emergency vehicles, police, fire, and ambulance, but also could provide some present and future relief to the residents of Hampton Bays. So the planning department has laid out a route. It does go through the property where the abandoned diner is. So in an effort to sort of save taxpayer money, the town owns the piece next to the diner. The idea is sort of to shift the diner over a little bit so that the road can get to the regular intersection there by Macy's and have a normal intersection. To achieve that, though, the switching of parkland does require the state to give you the ability to do it. And so the state legislature would be voting after this home rule on giving us that opportunity. And then we as a board get to decide whether we want to go down this road, so to speak. Sorry for the pun. And if so, we'd be putting it on the ballot, and the public would have the opportunity to decide if it wants to reconfigure these properties to allow for the creation of this access road. So I think that pretty much explains it. By voting here today, you are no way committing to place this on the ballot or move this forward, only to give us the option. And if so, we'll have another discussion at another point as to whether we want to move that forward. Any questions on that? Okay. Kathleen, did I kind of cover, and Lisa, did I cover everything? Okay, and Janice? Nothing more to be said? Okay. All right, I'll call, I need a motion to approve and a second. I made the motion by reading it. Was there a second? Councilman
second.
Martell is seconding. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, it's unanimous, approved. That is the only agenda I have. Is there any other business? Okay, seeing none, I will make a motion to adjourn.
Second.
Seconded by Councilman Lofstad. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Okay, we are adjourned. So just take a moment. We'll let Charles stop the recording here, and then we'll begin our work session.
I am ready.
All right, give me one second. Just give me one more second. All right, let me pull up the agenda here. Are we doing a COVID update? Doesn't look like it. All right. All right. Charles, you ready?
Yes, I am.
All right. I thought for a second I was still muted. All right, I'll count down from 5. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Good morning. I'd like to call to order this work session of the Southampton Town Board on this third day of June 2021. Please rise and join me for the Pledge of Allegiance.
Thank you.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Please be seated. Madam Clerk, would you call the roll?
Supervisor Schneiderman,
Here.
Councilwoman Lofstad,
Here.
Councilman Martell,
Here.
Councilman Bouvier,
Here.
Councilman Scavone.
Video is present.
Video is present. Yes, okay.
Was he muted?
He's muted and present.
I'm here.
Okay, I thought so.
All
Sorry
right.
about
All right. Well, good morning, everyone. I guess we're not starting with a COVID update, but let me say that the numbers continue to be good. We had our first 0 day of positive cases in the town of Southampton last week. I think it was Thursday last week. And then I think it was Saturday was the first day that there were 0 cases in any of the 5 East End towns, which was great to see. The other days, yes, we had a case or two. The last data I have, which is from 2 days ago, there were 3 cases. So it is still here. COVID is still among us. So we need to continue to be careful. But I'm looking forward to the days ahead based on the trajectory of the curve, which is very positive for us. So hopefully, Memorial Day gatherings and things don't change that. The vaccination numbers continue to, are very strong for the East End, higher than most other regions, which is very good as well. So, we will at some point soon, I think, stop doing these Zoom meetings for work sessions and come back to town hall. But at the moment, I think it still makes sense in light of the circumstances. So this meeting is being held via Zoom. The town board meeting scheduled for next Tuesday will be held in person. All right. So for that meeting, you all should have received the draft of the agenda. So why don't we run through it so that Sunday can finalize it and publish it. So this is the June 8th meeting, 2021. And this meeting will be held, as I said, live at Town Hall. It will begin at 1 p.m. And Charles, we're going to continue to make arrangements so people can also Zoom in for comments?
Yes, sir.
All right. So we're doing this, I think, pretty innovative hybrid model where people are able to watch the meeting from home on their TV or their computer. And if they feel compelled to speak, they can do so at public portion during a public hearing. So, we'll be providing that Zoom link. I know there may be some people who still feel uncomfortable for whatever reason, accessibility issues or COVID issues coming to town hall. So this is a way for them to communicate and share their comments with their elected representatives. All right, so we have, let's see, 2 public hearings. The first one will be on balloons. This is John Bouvier's legislation that would prohibit the sale of lighter than air balloons, helium balloons, etc., which would go into effect, I think, a year after it was enacted. And it's an environmental initiative, as you know. We've already held one hearing on this, so this is a continuation of that. The second one is to consider set improvements to Old Farm Road between Narrow Lane and Haynes Path, Sagaponack, pursuant to Town Law 200, and requesting acceptance of the same into the town highway system.
Resolution ID 36704, authorization for supervisor to sign application and contract to accept 2021 New York State Office of Children and Family Services funding for Southampton Town youth activities.
Town Board Resolution 36712. This is authorized purchase of Exagrid storage appliances. Exagrid.
Town Board Resolution ID 36678 to authorize the purchase of 2020 Mobark 6400X Wood Hog from Mobark LLC through the Sourcewell contract. Town Board Resolution ID 36659, authorized purchase of entrance lighting at Grantville Park from LMCO Services Incorporated using a Suffolk County contract. Town Board Resolution ID 36713, co-sponsored with Councilman Scavone, to authorize the supervisor to enter into a license agreement with the East End Special Players for the use of the Bridgehampton Community Center. Town Board Resolution ID 36708, also co-sponsored with Councilman Scavone, authorize the supervisor to execute an amendment to the license agreement with Bridgehampton Child Care and Recreation Center for temporary use of the Bridgehampton Community Center.
Resolution ID 36656, authorize the purchase of motor fuels from the Omni Partners Cooperative Contract with Truman Arnold Companies.
Town Board Resolution 36679. This is the authorized the renewal of Proofpoint through Sourcewell contract with Software House International.
Town Board Resolution ID 36650, authorize the supervisor to execute 2021 Parks and Recreation agreements for programs. Town Board Resolution ID 36684, authorize the supervisor to execute 2021 Parks and Recreation agreements for programs. Town Board Resolution 36632, authorize the supervisor to execute agreements with vendors for performances at Good Ground Park.
36671, authorize the supervisor to sign a contract extension with Gentile, Brengel, and Lynn LLP to perform independent audits of the ambulance districts within the town of Southampton.
Town Board Resolution 36670, declare item surplus and authorize disposal.
36667, purchase of one 2022 Ford F-250 Super Cab XL.
Town Board Resolution ID 36631, recall and amend Town Board Resolution 2021-1088, Parks and Recreation agreements for programs.
Resolution 36666, accepts donation for Southampton Town Police Department.
I'm sorry, could I interrupt for just a moment and go back to 36631 because it says 2020-1088 and then in another resolved it says 2021-1088.
Yeah, it should be 2021.
All of them should be 2021?
Yes. Yes.
Okay, I'll change that. Thank you. Sorry to interrupt.
So I think we're at 36683. Is that correct? We read the other one. I read the other one, right?
Yes, yes.
All right, 36683 amends 2021 adopted budget and authorizes general fund pay-as-you-go purchase for tub grinder. 36625 amends 2021 adopted budget for highway department and includes CHIPS, Pave New York, and EWR funding. 36711, Flanders Northampton Volunteer Ambulance Company Service Award Program.
Town Board Resolution ID 6663, selection of Topping Rayner House at West Hampton as recipient of the 2021 Southampton Town Landmarks Maintenance Awards. Is also co-sponsored with Councilman Scavone.
36629, authorize an acceptance of a donation of a trail map kiosk at the Daniel and Anna Mulvihill Preserve. The tenses are somehow weird in that. Authorize and accept, or authorization and acceptance, maybe?
Authorize the acceptance of a donation.
Authorize the acceptance of it. Okay, you're right. I for some reason read it as authorize and accept, but yeah, authorize the acceptance of a donation. No, that's fine. 36231 is 2021 part-time salaries. 36633 accepts resignation of a highway equipment operator in waste management. 36567 accepts retirement of Michael Lorenz, Animal Control Officer 1 in Animal Control. 36682 appoints Emily F. Strachan to Senior Environmental Analyst position in Community Preservation. 36706 appoints Martin Culleton to Ordnance Inspector position. 36680 appoints Zimaro Arango Medina to Assistant Recreation Leader position in Youth Management. 36615 ratifies last chance agreement. 36617 notice of public hearing on the acceptance of lands of Catco Group Inc. and Riverside Catwalk LLC, Riverside, and amends CPF management plan to include properties.
Resolution ID 36649, notice of public hearing to consider amending Town Code 330-109, fences, walls, accessory driveway structures, and clotheslines as it relates to the height of walls and slope of the grade immediately in front of the walls.
36293 amends the Town of Southampton Community Preservation Project Plan and CPF Management and Stewardship Plan to include the SSGRE Holdings LLC property, Flanders, and authorize acquisition. And there were some add-ons as well. So let's try to grab those. All right, and let's seeing it on my desktop. So just give me a second to reopen that. All right. 36715 amends the 2021 adopted budget and authorized purchase of Windsor Heart for Windsor Heart project. That is, as you know, we're doing this tribute to Edie Windsor. It's going to be fully paid for through heart sales. We are working though toward putting a deposit down with the paving, the company that's manufacturing the heart. So that's, and we are receiving donations toward that. 36717, notice of public hearing to consider authorizing the alienation of and discontinuance of approximately 2.9 acres of community preservation fund, parkland, and furtherance of the Good Ground Road extension in exchange for the encumbrance and dedication of approximately 13.28 acres of property to be used as parkland within the hamlet of Hampton Bays, Town of Southampton. So that is that notice of hearing that would allow that road creation to be put onto the ballot. I'm putting it on the agenda so we can get it onto the agenda. There's a very limited window of time that we have. So we can have Kathleen discuss that with us, the timing of it. I don't know. Let me see if Kathleen, are you still here?
I am, Mr. Supervisor. Good
Can you
morning.
speak to that briefly?
Sure. So in order to have at least 2 public hearings on this issue, it's appropriate to have the notice of hearing on for the June 8th meeting. which would allow you to have public hearings at your regular town board meetings of June 22nd and July 13th. There are three things that have to happen in order to get this, if the board is so inclined to have this considered. The first is an act of the state legislature, which you know from your earlier meeting is in process. The second is the adoption of this local law, if the board is so inclined, by 4/5 majority. And then the third is the approval at a mandatory referendum of the ballot proposition by a majority of the voters. As you know, the Board of Elections deadline is August 2nd for any ballot propositions to be at their office. So in order to accomplish that goal, if the board is so inclined, it's appropriate to schedule this now.
Anybody have any questions about that? You may have noticed too that this is the vote, not to set the public hearing, but the vote to actually authorize and put it on the ballot does require a supermajority, not a simple majority. All right. The next one is 36718. Councilman Martell, it's your resolution.
Yeah, authorize the Parks Director to enter into an interim agreements for mobile food concessions pursuant to Town Code 111-7B2 for 2021 summer season at Hot Dog Beach. And the last one is Town Board Resolution ID 36719, the 2021 notice to bidders for mobile concession at Good Ground Park.
Is that, Rick, do you know, is that there for the whole summer or is that just special events? How does that work at Good Ground Park?
It has in the past been for the summer. So it's one vendor for the summer.
Was it like an ice cream thing or?
Yeah, an icy truck. They do take other applications for special events too. So they could very well, if the town is doing an event, have a couple food trucks to their event. But this is generally for the day-to-day operation and for the concerts.
Okay. All right, any questions on the agenda? All right, is everybody okay with allowing Sunday to publish it with the add-ons? Okay, Sunday, you're good to go.
Great, thank you.
All right, so we're going back to the work session agenda. And at 10:30, boy, we are right on target here. 10:30, we have an update from the Anti-Bias Task Force. We're going to be joined by Jim Banks, the chairman, and several members of the Anti-Bias Task Force. So Charles, would you let everybody in?
Yes, sir.
John, you're a liaison to this organization, correct?
That's correct.
Do you want to introduce this for us?
Well, I think I'll leave that to Dr. Banks. They've worked hard on this. I missed a Zoom call. They had some technical difficulties, but they've done some really good work. And I'm actually quite proud of the Anti-Bias Task Force and its accomplishments. And the next year to come, I think we have some great things happening. So I'll hand that over to Dr. Banks.
All right. Hey, there's Dr. Love. Hey, Jim, good to see you.
Good to see you all as well. Can you hear me?
Barely. Can we turn him up somehow?
You know that the internet has been challenging recently. So, well,
To say the least, Jim.
Is there a way to make Jim louder?
yeah. Do I need to yell? Wait a minute. Maybe I'll put my headphones on.
That might work.
How's that?
Better.
Much
Much
You're
better?
talking to the mic. It's so much
Yeah,
better.
move that mic close to your mouth.
All right.
Yeah, we can hear you now.
All right. Yeah.
Much better. All right, Jim, do you want to introduce everybody?
Sure. First of all, good morning to you all, and thank you so much for hearing us and our presentation. we look forward to working collaboratively and cooperatively with the town board and you, Mr. Supervisor, so that we can provide some help and the voice of the community in this work that we are doing to try to be anti-bias and to put forth initiatives that support what we know is the town board's agenda, which is to be supportive of the community and to react to any kind of work we can do to improve our anti-bias initiatives. So thank you very much. As you all know, my name is James. They call me Dr. Love Banks. And the people who will be participating in this process are Michael Daly, Andrea Klausner, okay, Louise Stalzer, who, by the way, I wanted to give special props to, who has been kind of the chairperson of this this collaborative initiative that we've been working on as one of our groups. And then there's Denise Merchant, and of course myself. We will be talking about housing and education, as we see them to be preeminent and important for us to talk about in these days and times. And we know you feel similarly. Okay, I don't want to take up too much time, but I just want to say that the Southampton Anti-Bias Task Force is touted countywide, okay, for being the longest and most consistently running ABTF in Suffolk County. Longest running. So there's applause to be made for the town and all the community members who support it. Over my long running involvement, we've done things like deal with tackled housing. We've tackled immigrant issues, discrimination issues in terms of it as individuals and proprietors. We've worked on crisis intervention, healthcare issues, body and dash cams, indigenous people acknowledgement, and holiday changes. I could go on and on. Racism, police reimagining. We've been involved in that process, and thank you for inviting us to participate in that process, because we know that that will strengthen our already excellent police force here in the town of Southampton. And so we're going to really talk. We've gone to court with people. You know, I could go on and on to deal with resident housing issues, and even have gone on going as far as reaching out to support other nationwide activities and actions. But I don't want to spend too much time talking about those things. We're going to open by asking our first presenter to begin with his presentation, and that is Michael Daly. Mike, are you there?
Good morning. Yes, I am.
All right. Welcome, Mike.
Thank you. Good morning, Jim, and good morning to the town board and all members present. So we have been at the ABTF working on this presentation for nearly as long as the community housing and VHB have been working on the housing plan that was just presented to you last week, I believe it was. And I did. I was not present for the live version of that, but I did watch that. I did watch that presentation, and I thought that it was a good presentation. What struck me was the board's response to the word density when it came up, and because density is really just a measurement of people within a defined area, but has been turned into kind of a four-letter, rally cry by the NIMBYs over recent generations. That anything that the word density in and of itself is a bad thing, but in reality, the density is just a measurement of people within a defined area. And so I'm going to be brief. Basically, some of this is really kind of low-hanging fruit that, as some of you may know, I've been working on a voluntary basis with Diana Weir over the last several years, and Julie can tell you she's We bumped into each other at several CAC meetings. I've been attending North Sea CAC meetings, East Quogue, and several others to talk about affordable housing and what each community sees for themselves as good solutions for them. But affordable housing is a community benefit, just like parkland and open space. And the crisis we're in now has festered for over a generation. And while it's not the fault of current town leadership, we see it as a responsibility of town leadership to take bold and corrective measures. So my specific recommendations, and I'll run through this list, is accessory apartment zoning modifications. I will tell you, as a member of the Zoning Board of Appeals, that we regularly have variances which are costly, time-consuming, variance requests for zoning for accessory apartments for people who live in more densely populated areas, and perhaps the zoning that is currently in place for them does not allow them. So we would recommend relaxing the zoning requirements for accessory apartments, okay, as listed on the attached sheet. Second one is motel conversions. We've seen quite a number of motels in the area that have really been converted into affordable housing, but not in an official capacity. So we would recommend that the zoning be allowed and there be provisions in the town code adding apartments to the special exception provision to convert motels into co-ops or condos. Okay, and there's a couple of examples, and we're all familiar with the ones that would be the low-hanging fruit for that. Zombie house conversions. We've all seen zombie houses throughout the township. There are other municipalities that have very effective eminent domain procedures and creating a process to take over zombie houses and turn them into community housing. The fourth one is there are several properties that the town does own, and by town resolution were to be allocated to the Southampton Housing Authority. 308 Riverly Avenue is one of them, but there, for some reason that some of them have not been completed or turned over to the Housing Authority. And it's really clear to us that the Southampton Housing Authority has demonstrated a strong ability to develop and manage housing in the area, as evidenced by quite a number of the projects that they have done. And we'd encourage the town to turn over any and all property that has been identified by town resolution to be used for affordable housing to them. Assisted living facilities, we just need more of them. We need more for seniors. And a lot of this is discussed in the housing plan that was turned over to you last week. And then the last point that I'd like to make is something that actually got discussed for quite clearly at this housing meeting that you had, and that is creating the as of right opportunities for some of this affordable housing, but call it community housing because that's what it really is. Creating the as of right vehicle for community housing to be developed in the township is so critical, because the minute that it comes to a politicized process, it slows down to a grinding halt, and is just so much more difficult and intimidating to anyone who wishes to contribute to the development of community housing. So you talked about that at length at your last meeting, and that's just noted here as number 6. Depoliticizing the process and creating as of right opportunities for development of community housing. really help us with this crisis that we're in. So thank you for your time, and I'll turn it back to Jim.
Jim, can we ask any questions here or
If you care to.
no?
Yeah, sure.
I had a question or two. Michael, you talked about relaxing the code related to affordable accessory apartments or accessory apartments. And right now you need, I think, a half acre. It was relaxed from 3/4 of an acre minimum lot size, which we felt really shut out most of the properties in the town. And particularly those within walking distance of bus stops and shopping and things like that.
Right.
We dropped it down to half an acre. But we did say that all accessory apartments had to be affordable. And so my two questions are, one, when the ZBA grants variances, are they putting affordability restrictions on those as a part of that variance? And also, what specifically are you suggesting? How should we change it? So that's question one.
Part A to your question is when we grant variances, to my knowledge, is it's always with the requirement that the accessory apartment does meet the criteria of the accessory apartment legislation. So yes, affordability is important, and many of these are for family members. They're for younger family members. They're for older family members, or at least that's the application. That's how it's presented as application. Some of them are made by people who bought. Very often we find accessory apartment applications for people who bought homes that had not legalized accessory apartments in them. They bought them with the understanding that they were going to be able to live in this home and offset some of their costs by having income from an accessory apartment. And then they went through the process, or they did something to get an updated CO, and they came to realize that they bought a house that had a not legalized accessory apartment in it. And if they give that apartment up, they won't be able to afford the house anymore. So that seems to be another common application that we're getting, is forgiveness for an accessory apartment rather than the request for it. But so it's an important part of the income and affordability for some people to be able to live here, to have accessory apartments, for older people to be able to afford to live in their homes. And you've talked about this for years. We've been talking about this for years, is the ideal situation of allowing an elderly person to stay in their home by gaining some income to offset the cost of living and their taxes and things like that. So that's the answer to question one, is yes, ZBA does it with the requirements for the affordability and all the other aspects of accessory apartments. And then secondly, it's your challenge in terms of reducing it to a 1/4 acre, because density and being in more smaller lot areas where perhaps cars are not required, because it costs $5,000 a year is the average cost to have a car today. And if you have someone who's working at the Golden Pear Cafe or at Cinderella or something, or at a local coffee shop or market, for people to be able to have accessory apartments in more of the village areas and not necessarily require a car would really help with our employment situation. So my recommendation would be to reduce it to a 1/4 of an acre, which would include more village and more village type neighborhood areas, and allow people who don't require cars to be able to take those accessory apartments in the commercial districts.
Yeah, thank you so much, Mike, for that response. Supervisor Snyderman, I think we might want to hold off on the questions so that we might be able to get to all of our presentation and possibly maybe save the questions for latter.
Okay.
Okay, just thank you so much for that question, because I am so excited about the fact that everybody is here and attending to our process. By the way, I just got an email from Denise Merchant, who says she is here and listening, but we don't see her. So I don't know what can be done about that.
Is she on
She
a
can be let
phone?
in.
Is she on a phone? Because I don't
Right.
see her name. That's
Okay.
fine.
I don't know. She's listening, so maybe she can answer that by emailing me or texting me.
I allowed her the phone to speak, so if
Okay,
she's
it
on
just
the
says,
phone, she can
"Hi,
speak.
I am here and listening, but don't see me." So she may be on the phone. I don't know.
Yeah.
Hopefully she'll answer that by text or so on. Let's
Well,
move on so that
phone
everybody.
caller can talk now.
Okay. I'll check in with her after. I'd like to move on so that we get everybody in. If I think that we are getting a little too long-winded, I'll use my bell to kind of get us back on task, all right? Because I know it could be these wonderful, distinguished presenters that are members of so many various committees and community groups have so much to say. And I may have to ring them out for a little bit. Okay, moving right along. The next of our presenters is Andrea Klausner. All right, welcome, Andrea, and please do your presentation at this point.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay, because I also see all of you, but I can't get my picture onto the screen. I don't know why.
Okay.
I'm having this problem as Denise. But anyway, I'll go ahead, and I apologize for not being able to join you, at least for you to see me.
We still love you.
Thank you. I even put on makeup. Okay. Anyway, hello everyone, and thank you for giving us this opportunity to engage in our advisory role. And I read through the housing plan, and there were several references to fair housing. I'm going to be talking about fair housing. I just wanted to start by underscoring that affordable housing and fair housing are not synonymous. They're two different concepts, and they can overlap, but not necessarily. Affordable housing is housing offered to the public at below fair market rate, defined by regional AMI, as defined by HUD. But fair housing is the achievement of integrated and balanced living patterns to overcome the vestiges of illegal segregation practices, such as redlining, steering, and neighborhood busting. And while affordable housing may in fact advance the goal of integration, it's also possible to implement affordable housing in ways that fail to achieve or even undermine fair housing goals, such as clustering affordable housing only in certain areas or hamlets of the township instead of spreading it out throughout the township. I just wanted to very briefly talk about all of the protected classes under federal, state, and county fair housing laws, because we are usually most familiar with the major ones where we see most discrimination, and that's including race, color, and disability. But there are many more protected classes that we should be aware of. So under the federal fair housing laws, people are protected from housing discrimination on the basis of race, color, national origin, sex, religion, familial status, and handicap disability. New York State adds fair housing protection to the following groups: marital status, sexual orientation, age, military status, creed, gender identity, gender expression, source of income, and this is fairly new, the Section 8 protection and arrest. And then finally, under Suffolk County fair housing laws, housing protection is extended to residents on the basis of veteran status as a victim of domestic violence, and group identity, which is actual or perceived identity in certain groups. So the remedies to individuals, and this doesn't necessarily involve the town, but the remedies to individuals who have been discriminated against can be pursued through HUD's Fair Housing Equal Opportunity Office, the New York State Division of Human Rights, the Suffolk County Human Rights Commission, or through judicial action. What's important for the town and municipalities is that litigation may result from violating the fair housing laws by either passing exclusionary zoning ordinances or accepting federal grant money without affirmatively furthering fair housing. And I just wanted to bring to your attention 2 landmark cases and a major settlement. And because it was a settlement, it may or may not have consequences in the future, but it very well may. So the initial landmark case was the Mount Laurel, New Jersey case, which established the doctrine that municipalities must use their zoning powers in such a way as to provide low and moderate income residents with a realistic opportunity to afford housing within their borders. This was brought by the NAACP, and in that case, many of the low and moderate income residents were persons of color. And so their affordable housing and fair housing coincided. In Berenson, the court, and this is where I used to live in Newcastle, the court extended the Mount Laurel doctrine to include the needs of both the municipality as well as surrounding municipalities in determining whether a zoning ordinance by a township is reasonable and provides for a balanced and cohesive housing plan. So that means the town has to look not only within its borders, but to the entire region to see whether zoning ordinances are reasonable. And then finally, in the case in Westchester County, U.S. versus Westchester County, a new tact was taken, and the lawsuit was based upon a violation of the False Claims Act for taking federal funds under false pretenses. So even though the county had accepted money and was building affordable housing through federal grant money, they did not identify the impediments to fair housing and affirmatively furthering fair housing. So most of the affordable housing units were built in the same few urban areas, which continue to segregate people of color. And so in the settlement, the county was required to appropriate and spend nearly $52 million in county funds to develop 750 affordable housing units in Westchester neighborhoods with very small African American and Latinx populations. So in terms of recommendations for actions by the town, on page 42 of your housing plan, you talk about establishing fair housing practices. And here are some of our recommendations. One is to, under fair housing education, to publish a brochure entitled Fair Housing, Know Your Rights and Responsibilities Under the Law, that is sent to the entire town. And speaking with the Long Island Housing Services, a nonprofit organization dedicated to fair housing, they already have a lot of these brochures and would be happy to work with the town in creating something specific for our town. We also would like to see the town co-sponsor with the Anti-Bias Task Force a webinar on fair housing and fair lending that's targeted to relevant constituents, such as property owners, landlords, real estate agents, banks, local town officials, and grassroots groups assisting underserved populations. Such groups should be aware of the laws and that they may be subjected to paired testing without their knowledge. And I refer you to acknowledgement of this HUD program on page 37 of your housing plan. This does take place throughout Suffolk County and could be taking place in Southampton as well. Additionally, such groups should be made aware that it violates the law to engage in steering and redlining and neighborhood busting, which results in white flight and is ostensibly lowers property values. And then finally, we would also recommend that you review all community block grant contracts to make sure that you're complying with affirmatively furthering fair housing obligations. Make sure you've submitted the requisite analyses of impediments, which must include a determination of what impediments stand in the way of fair housing, and must include impediments to all federally protected class members. And your review should also take into account the fact that zoning ordinances and other housing policies may be neutral on their face, but may have a disparate impact on minorities and other protected classes. So you should be aware of this in setting policy. And that's about all I have for you. And I hope that's all.
Thank you very much, Andrea. As you can see, Town Council and other board members and other members of the Anti-Bias Task Force, these individuals have put a lot of work into researching and connecting with extraneous and external groups to support their presentations. All right, next we have Louise Stalzer. Welcome, Louise.
Thank you. I haven't been here for a while in front of the town board, but happy to be here and thank you for the opportunity. I think what I see is a lot of dedicated people on the Anti-Bias Task Force. And I think what we thought was for today was how can we advise in terms of a powerful, to advise the town board and how to really address diversity. And certainly in your housing plan, you do that. But I think that can be made stronger still by looking at, for example, Arlington County in Virginia. They did a housing compendium, and what they did was they just took one paragraph and they recognized the history of the community, and they used that as a way to really come to a point where we're looking at the real recognition that we have an issue. We have an issue in the community, in the town, in the county. In our town, it was built a lot about because of the environment, but we've come to a point where where we need to take real strong action. And I worked here back in 2009. I left here and I worked in the Housing Authority and for land management. And the town has made tremendous strides. So I'm just really have to applaud you all. But just to really make it more powerful and to really come home on that idea of diversity that you put in the plan, that you put a paragraph. And I think the Anti-Bias Task Force I could see would be very appropriate to submit a paragraph, just to start it, to make a statement and say what the history is. I don't think it has to be anything dramatic, but it can say about the people that used to live here and that we need to make it so that they can come back, that we can all live together and they can come back and we can certainly move in a more positive direction. So Arlington County, and again, if the town board agrees, we would do that paragraph. And then the other thing I did was I looked at a lot of things, but I looked at particularly exclusionary zoning and the zoning code. So I really wanted just to read off what the definition of that is to realize how encompassing it is. And this builds on what Andrea said about fair housing, and really helps to explain not just our community, because I think you have to look at Up Island, where we have some real serious situations, and all across the nation, but just to see how it applies to us and see what the part of it is. So I'll just read it now. Exclusionary zoning is the use of zoning ordinances to exclude certain types of land uses from a given community. As of the 2010s, exclusionary zoning ordinances are standard in almost all communities. Exclusionary zoning was introduced in the early 1900s, typically to prevent racial and ethnic minorities from moving into middle and upper class neighborhoods. Municipalities use zoning to limit the supply of available housing units, such as by prohibiting multifamily residential dwellings or setting minimum lot size requirements. These ordinances raise costs, making it less likely that lower income groups will move in. Development fees for variance, land use, a building permit, a certificate of occupancy, a filing legal cost, special permits and planned unit development applications for new housing also raise prices to levels inaccessible for lower income people. Exclusionary zoning is done to safeguard the individual's property value, reduce traffic congestion, and exclude unlike groups. Exclusionary land use policies exacerbate social segregation by deterring any racial and economic integration, decrease the total housing supply of a region, and raise housing prices. As well, regions with much economic segregation channel lower income students into lower performing schools, thereby prompting educational achievement differences. A comprehensive survey in 2008 found that over 80% of United States jurisdictions imposed minimum lot size requirements of some kind on their inhabitants. These ordinances continue to reinforce discriminatory housing prices throughout the United States. So my point, really a recommendation, as well as the paragraph at the beginning, is to really review the whole zoning for the town, the zoning code for the town of Southampton, to somehow initiate that review, because there are things in there, while not blatant or very offensive, we know that any kind of preference for affordable housing is really lends itself to exclusionary zoning. I know the town of Oyster Bay was sued in the last couple of years for that they were building what seemed to be pretty innocent kind of housing for their town, open only to the residents in their town. But they were sued by the US versus town of Oyster Bay because their town had 3% of the population of African American and Black people, whereas the surrounding communities had much more, something like 8 to 10%. So the way that was settled was not a monetary settlement, but it was settled by the not-for-profit agreeing to not give any preference. So things that we might have thought were pretty innocent or doing something really good, sometimes by these fair housing rules, you really are excluding people. So and then just to say that when we look at right of way, these uses, the uses, table of uses, and the dimensional requirements throughout the different zoning districts, we really do need as of right. And one of the ways to do that is your use of the smaller units, the duplexes and triplexes, and to really take that and and that's the missing middle that we talk about, missing middle housing, that there's a way to do it. So, and if the town already has that in the plan and has does have a form-based zoning in its plan. But if we could begin to, one suggestion is that we begin to look across all the different districts in the town. And if we allow this form-based, these duplexes and triplexes, the missing middle housing in all those different zones, we can then begin to that becomes then as of right. And then what some communities have done is they put a separate table of uses for each of the type of duplexes and what setbacks are and all the dimensional requirements, whatever needs to happen. But it takes it out of that initial town board having to review it. So this is talked about quite a bit in Beaufort County, South Carolina is one example, Arlington County in Virginia, and others. And there's a missing middle book that's out there. I can send it. Janice has it, but if not, Janice Schreier, I can send it over to her, drop off a copy. It's a really good resource for missing middle housing and using this floating zone. Also for the floating zone, another example of floating zone codes and putting that in place is the Beaufort County example. I could talk to you about inclusionary housing. There are a lot of ways you've done it in your code. This is an area where, of course, you've already done and can do more. There are many. I'll give some examples of inclusionary zoning. You can offer zoning bonuses, expedited permits, reduced fees, cash subsidies, or other incentives for developers who voluntarily build affordable housing, minimum size of development that the ordinance applies to. Most jurisdictions exempt smaller developments, but some require that even developments incurring only a fraction of an exclusionary housing unit pay a fee. So, and whether fees can be paid in lieu of building inclusionary housing. Fees in lieu allow a developer to buy out of an inclusionary housing obligation. And just there's quite a few here. I'm sure you can find it online as well. And I think I covered all that I wanted to cover today, but again, I just think you're doing a great job. I know you're already on the way, but I think that there is a way that we can be even stronger. And I think that we can take that angst of all of those meetings that I hear about now, continue to happen to fight affordable housing, that when we begin to address the as of right criteria and go across all the different hamlets. And yeah, okay, thank you.
Thank you so much, all of you who have gone already for your comprehensive presentations. And we're excited about this, as I mentioned before, because we recognize the connection between housing and especially affordable housing and what's happening in our educational system with regard to hiring of new employees and teachers who are of a minority descent, et cetera. So that's one of the reasons why we've connected it. And I know that you recognize it as well, because we've seen it in some of the projects that you have presented thus far. Next on our agenda, we have Denise Merchant. Denise, are you there?
Charlie, anything you need to do on your end to allow Denise to be heard?
Denise?
Charlie?
Make sure Denise knows she has to put in a number and then
I'm doing it now.
to unmute.
Well, all the phones are allowed to speak. There's no way I could tell who was who.
She said she did the
Can you
number.
hear me now?
Yes.
Yes.
All right. Somebody sent me a message to press *6. So whoever that was, thank you.
Okay.
And that allowed me to unmute my mic. Who knew? I didn't know. Anyway, this is very exciting. This is very passionate to me, the components, especially anything that impacts education and equity and access there too. So I'm going to start by just talking about the impact on fair housing and access to housing, affordable housing on education. So I did send in information, so I hope everybody has that in front of them as well. So I'm briefly just going to go over it. The impact on families is in several areas. Improve student performance through stability. Access to equitable housing increases the stability of students and opportunity to participate in more rigorous settings, and reduces the student population who have interrupted formal education. When you have unstable housing or unstable housing, children move a lot, and then therefore, what they learn in one district may not be taught again in another district because they missed it when they went one place or the other through all the movements. It also reduces some of the McKinney-Vento issues that we may face also because of triple ups, unstable housing, things like that. Improved mental health of children through consistency in residency and the sense of belonging in school districts. Reduction of overcrowding. There are, I don't know how much that impacts us here in Southampton, but the other districts who may, because of their housing situations that they have overcrowding situations because their homes are more affordable for the lower income families. There's improved health physically as well, because the homes, when you have affordable housing and stable housing, tend to have less physical instability, such as like lead poisoning and living conditions that are less enticing. There's an impact on staffing as well. The increase in diversity in pedagogy, that there are teachers who can't afford to live out here either. So I remember when we would post for, and you put those code words in to try to entice diversity of a population of teachers or staff, they would say, yeah, but my commute would be insurmountable, so I can't come out there and work. So if we had more affordable housing, it would entice and then maintain and allow them to be a part of our community and be more accessible and visible and present in the school setting as well. Teachers and support staff live closer are underrepresented by a diverse staff. There have been many studies that have been out there. Hofstra has done them. New York State Ed has done them. It is kind of like I don't want to say like the catchphrase of today, given our world and where we are socially, but the newest initiative from New York State Ed is diversity and inclusion in education, and they are really mandating that school districts have policies that support diversity and inclusion in education. And then another way to support that would be if we had affordable housing that could. So it's almost like that little nursery rhyme, there was an old lady who swallowed a fly, and then she had to swallow this, and she swallowed that, and it's like everything is contingent upon something else in order to be the ideal scenario. So there's also long intern packs. Hofstra University did studies on that. And another one of the New York State education goals is to have civic-minded, holistic young adults that are the product of their education, their 12 years in education. And without having a representation of the world, and especially of the people teaching them as the population of students that they serve, there are all kinds of undertow of things that occur. There's overrepresentation of discipline for minority children. There's under-access of identification of children of color or diverse backgrounds to participate in more rigorous academic settings. Because if you have a school body of teachers that are 90% and the other 10% are, diverse, I guess, or people of color or something like that. It doesn't match with the population of students. I included the racial and ethnic diversity of New York State teachers' workforce graph that shows from 2011, 2016, 17, how the inequities in that population are. And so let's say, for instance, all the blues, the white students were, let's say, 40% of the student body. And then the children of color were at least 50%. And then there were, of course, others. But then the staff, it had like an 80 to 90% ratio of white teachers versus the 10 to 20% of minority teachers, or I should say teachers of color or a diverse background. And then there's all the other implications that go into why the education of the students, both Black and white and Hispanic, whatever your color, is not as rich as it could be or optimal as it could be, because there are all those biases that play into it. And it really does stem from, or one of the places where it stems from, is having the ability to have access to fair housing, so that there could be the opportunity to have a more rich and diverse staff that could provide education to all students. And everybody benefits with the diverse situation. So that's pretty much what I wanted to say. I'm done.
Jim, you're
Can't hear
muted.
you.
Jim Banks, you're muted.
Trying to help you.
All right, am I unmuted?
We're back.
Oof. You know, I have a double screen process here, so I don't know which screen to work with first. All right, but anyway, thank you so much, Denise, for a comprehensive presentation. As I said earlier, education and housing are so connected, it's important for us to address it. Now, I recognize that the jurisdiction over education is lesser for the town council than it is for housing. However, the investment that we all can make to support education and the education process includes having ongoing conversations with our educational practitioners. I have had the wonderful opportunity to meet with the principals of our school district, who in fact have established and are continuing to meet a committee to address K through 12 diversity infusion. And I'm sorry. What we have established was to borrow some information from other districts that I work with. As you guys know, I'm on the task force as a liaison in Riverhead, and also I'm on the task force in Brookhaven, because that's where they've connected me. So from them, I am working with those districts as well. And we came up with the presentation, a lot of which I have presented verbatim and don't have to talk about them. All right, because you can read it at any given time. And I know that you at this point must be kind of used up in terms of listening. But I did want to say that what we did was we have established thus far through our committee here in Southampton, a cultural infusion process, which includes age-appropriate educational infusion. And I sent that outline to you, where we would do family, a theme of culture and families for K through first grade, and through second grade, we do a theme of culture and families overview as well. And that our agenda will focus on Africa and its location and geography and things like that. I'm not going to read them verbatim. And then on grades 3 through 5, we're talking about cultural and technological development, which in fact includes focusing on the dynamic dimensions of the historical and physical development of Africa, and with respect to the country and our state and the biographies and timelines that have occurred since then, in such things as science, technology, and literature, most of which we are expecting the educators to infuse into their classes, how people of color have invested and participated in the development of those particular subject areas. In addition, we are going to be talking about such things as why Kemet, which is the other name for Egypt, and Nubia are left out of the educational process with respect to identifying them as places in the Mediterranean and not included in the African area of Africa. So we are going to talk about how both places need to be included when discussing Egypt and Nubia, because of their scientific and scientological and technological things that they have invested into the development of the world's education, and including mathematics and science and things like that. And as we go along, we are going to increase in the grades 6 through 8 information about Europe, Asia, and the American and Caribbean and Florida, and how the students will focus on geographic humanities and multicultural perspectives. And moving right along, we're talking at the high school level, 9 through 12, we're talking about things like how African Americans have contributed and identified or participated in America and the world. And we will talk about, they will talk about the abolition of slavery, civil rights, constitutional rights, and contributions of African Americans in the world overview. So why I'm talking about it at this level is to identify that we are trying to make sure that what is being educated, or what the students are being educated with, is age appropriate and will respond to the needs of the students in terms of their learning capacity. What I wanted to say is that the elementary school principals and the high school principals were enamored with the presentations that we are creating, and have invested and involved faculty members in the development of the process for Southampton schools. The last thing that I will talk about is to suggest that one of the things that we are doing in the Riverhead School District, or the Riverhead area for the Anti-Bias Task Force, is a implicit bias training that includes what I believe is significant, all right? And that is to recognize that we can't train away discrimination and bias through training alone. I believe that we have to deal with and touch on the spiritual and also the feeling parts of where those discriminations and implicit biases live inside of people. And a part of the training is going to include how in every race there's anti-Blackness, in every culture there's things like meritocracy and privileges and assumption of equity that we have to attend to, not just the self-examination of our own implicit biases. We have to look at that too, but not just that. We have to look at where they come from and how we might respond to it. And we're going to do it through visual learning, through videos, and addressing thoughts and feelings, and also have spiritual and philosophical discussions with visualizations. And I'll use my hypnotic training and meditation training to get people to visualize it in a different way. So why I included that is because I think that we are going to be discussing how to infuse that into our process of training the trainers when it comes to the educators in the district. And as I said earlier, we all recognize how important housing is on how successful educators will be. Denise alluded to it very specifically in identifying how many times in trying to hire new personnel from diverse backgrounds is difficult because they can't find affordable housing. So to couple all of this together and to address what we are trying to present is that we want to continue to progress through the needs of Southampton Town and its residents in ways that we think will help us to become even better than we already are. And I'm complete.
All right. Thank you. Thank you, Jim. Thank you to all the members of the Anti-Bias Task Force for all the work you did. Very comprehensive. And, the housing issues in particular are so important and so critical to our future. Although I do have questions, I'm going to refrain from those questions because of the time. I will say, though, that there's a couple things that I'm working on that fall into the as of right category, which I think is really important. And also the assembly bill did pass. Remember the reason why we did the housing plan was sort of in preparation for a new fund that could exist for affordable housing as a surcharge on home sales, which has been estimated, could generate, I forget what the number is, $10 million or something like that a year, which is sizable. One thing I'm thinking of is, if we're able to provide grants for accessory apartments for those people who maybe can't afford to build out the accessory apartment, who qualify for an accessory apartment, but don't want to spend $40,000 putting it in, where, for $40,000, if we could build out the apartment for somebody, and as long as it stayed in the program, stayed affordable, they don't have to pay the $40,000 back, only if they drop out of the program. That kind of thing is a way to maybe create a lot of affordable housing, but we would almost need a group out there reaching out to people and taking care of the paperwork and the construction, doing everything for somebody, so that all they have to do is agree that, yeah, their basement could be an apartment for somebody. So anyway, I'm looking at some other things as well, but I wish we had more time to go into more detail. You guys did a really great job and covered so many complex issues. And the topic is complex, but it's really pretty simple. We've priced out our workforce. We've pushed out the soul of our community, and it's easy to see when a year-round home with local workers becomes a summer home. Now you got to provide workers for that summer home, and and you've also lost the workers that were here in the community. So you've doubled your traffic, tripled your traffic. So I think people understand that we have to house some of our workforce for lots of reasons, not just traffic, but to be a true community. So we have a lot of work ahead of us. I do think, though, this board is committed to making a difference on this issue, which is good. And we have a great ally in the Anti-Bias Task Force. It's sad that Diana at the housing office is retiring at some point. We've got her maybe for another month or two, but we are hoping to replace her with somebody also very capable. And, we're going to continue this mission to create more housing opportunities. Anyone else wants to say on this?
Yeah, I'd like to close when we get a chance. All right.
John, anything
anyone else
you wanted to say, or anything any board members want to say?
Well, I just want to thank you guys for a great presentation. Not a surprise. Really well done. You touched and made some of these complicated issues comprehensible to a lot of people. particularly the intersection between affordable housing, our workforce, bias, is just superbly done, and I really appreciate it. I want to, in fact, I did forward the presentation to some others, and I know we have a meeting next week. Well, we can talk about that and how we build on this. So I just really wanted to thank you guys. As the supervisor said, this is certainly an issue that's at the forefront of the town's agenda, this administration's agenda. We're moving, albeit slowly, but we're making, I think, significant inroads into this issue. And Louise, thank you. Thank you so much. Denise, thank you. And Mike, thank you for your perspective, particularly when it comes to how that intersects with government directly, and what we can do. And I appreciate that you watched the housing plan presentation. There was a lot of discussion about zoning, and I will make my plug again that we need a bottom-up, top-down review of our zoning in the town of Southampton sooner than later. So thank you guys again, and thank you, town board, for listening and supporting a lot of the efforts that come out of this committee. Sometimes they do, sometimes you don't, but this committee works hard, and we've had some interesting experiences over the last couple of years. And I want to thank you in particular, Dr. Love, for what you do. Thank you.
John, thank you for being liaison to this. And I don't remember if you mentioned Andy Klausner too, but thank you.
Yeah, I'm sorry, that's who I slipped. Sorry, Andy.
No problem. And Denise.
And Denise.
Yeah.
Yes.
So, Tommy John, I thought you had your hand up before. Did you want to say something?
I did. I want to thank the members of the anti-bias task force as well. Denise, Andy, Louise, Mike, Jim, good to see you again as well. And good work. Like Councilman Bouvier said, you took some complex issues and made them a bit more digestible. I've been watching our numbers as far as the housing sales. And last year, if we had this fund in place, the 5 East End towns would have collected $35 million to put into various housing initiatives and projects and things like that. And I think it's a missed opportunity. Currently this year in Southampton town alone, the fund would have been $10 million as of the end of April. So it's certainly significant. It can do some real good if it's established, and I hope that it makes it through the Senate and signed by the governor. I'm glad you mentioned it, education. I spent 32 years as a teacher, and I do believe that really, to quote others, the foundation of any state is the education of its youth, and it's the great equalizer. So thank you for pushing that.
Thank you.
Thank you, Tommy John. All right, we're gonna move along here in the agenda. We'll let you guys exit. We have another item, which is tub grinder.
Yeah, may I say one more paragraph very briefly?
Sorry, Jim, you wanted to close. Yes.
Yeah, no problem. It's not really that expansive. I just want to thank you for the time allotment that you've made to us and your commitment to bringing the community together through our annual celebratory picnic that has been on Liaison recently. One of the things that I'm excited about is Riverhead is investing in the training program that I mentioned to you. And you have been very supportive in investing in whatever we ask for, basically in the town of Southampton. It's my way of touting Southampton when I go elsewhere, all right, to say that you guys do support us, and ladies do support us in our projects. So our program for the picnic, we intend to reignite it. And so we're hoping that you'll continue to help us finance that and to encourage the change that we are working on in our town. I call it FUBU, for us, by us. All right. Thank you so much. And we'll see you soon with new movements.
Great. Thank you, Jim.
You're welcome.
All right, thank you.
Bye, everybody. Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you.
Thanks, team. Thanks, Louise. Thanks, everybody.
Okay, so we're going to move on. We have a conversation about the tub grinder. You heard in the when I was reading resolutions earlier for the meeting next week, there's a resolution relating to purchasing that tub grinder. We've discussed this a little bit in the past. We have Len Marchese, our controller, getting on this Zoom, as well as our town engineer and municipal works director, Chris Fenton, coming on as well. So, and, you know, I had raised at the last meeting some questions about how we were going to pay for this. It's I think $800,000 expense that was unanticipated. Everybody seemed to feel that it was really needed, that we had to continue these operations. And, you know, I, you know, made reference to the fact that this enterprise fund had, you know, it used to break even, but now it's being supported with significant tax dollars. And I just wanted to make sure that we had the ability to cover the debt service on this. I asked some questions about whether we needed to charge more for the commercial haulers who bring in this material, and whether we could sell this material. I also asked questions about surplusing the old tub grinder and scrap metaling it, or maybe trying to get some value out of it in a sale. Anyway, so this is really a continuation of that conversation with the controller and with Chris Fenton. And Len, I know you've been looking at this. You're looking to do this with an application of, I think, reserves. So can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, actually, we're not going to use reserves, but as you know, the refinancing market or the housing market, whatever it's attributable to, our mortgage tax revenue is significantly higher than we've budgeted. So I have a resolution that was prepared. I think you're the sponsor. I'm not sure who.
I am.
That increases our revenue projections for mortgage tax and appropriates that money towards this purpose. The Waste Management Enterprise Fund, the backstop of that, when the revenues fall short, are the general fund taxpayers. The whole town has to pay for that shortfall. So this is basically an extension of the whole town paying for that shortfall. And that being said, I think this is a one-off situation where we have to purchase something like this, but I still think that we need to look at the revenue stream coming in and try to, the whole idea of an enterprise fund is so that the revenues generated equal the expenses, so that the people that don't use the operation don't have to pay for it. It's just only fair. So right now we have a financially imbalanced fund where taxpayers who are don't maybe even know where the transfer station is, they have a card or whatever, they're now supplementing that operation. So I think the board needs to consider something in terms of fees, costs, whatever, to bring that fund back into balance. It's quite unbalanced.
And we've had some pretty high costs in compliance with the DEC regulations because of the registration, the volume that was coming in, because I think a lot of the private companies have gotten out of this business. Some maybe they weren't supposed to be in it. Some just got out for other reasons, but we're seeing more volume. So we had to put some physical changes in to be able to meet the registration requirements. Those were costly as well. So let me kick it over to Chris. Thank you, Chris, for being here. And I'm trying to approach this thing like a business. We need a new piece of equipment. It's a very expensive piece of equipment. How do we make it pay for itself? I know we give a lot of the material we produce away. I don't know whether we could be selling some of it. I know we take it in a particular price. I don't know that what we charge people is competitive with the marketplace. I don't know any of that. So maybe you could kind of talk a little bit about the operations and ways you think that maybe we can get the books to be a little more balanced.
Of course, we've spoken about this during the budget process in the past and last week as well. This is a critical piece of equipment in that it also helps us to deal with hazard mitigation in response to hurricane impacts townwide. We currently charge a fair value for incoming contractors. We can look to end constituents for yard waste. We currently offer 2 amnesty periods to residential self-haulers in the spring and the fall time. If the town wished to get out of that amnesty, we could, and generate funds during that time of fall and spring cleanup to the residents and the contractors. The contractors are able to get a highway voucher for disposal of resident material during that time as well. So if those programs were considered to as potential revenue areas instead of subsidized by the town, that's an option. We talked about in the budget process a fee to use the transfer stations. We have not yet implemented that because we, at the same time, we're investigating North Sea land community solar program or community distributed generation program at the landfill that had the potential of a cost offset to our increased cost of operations. We're still in the process of that. As I stated last week, we're still in the process of renovating the town yard waste facilities to become to be in compliance with the DEC permits that we have obtained to increase our capacity, which is still not enough to handle all of town yard waste. So I would like to think that we do not need to be the only game in town for yard waste disposal. So that's why we are giving our compost and mulch away at this point in time, because we have too much on site to do the repairs that we need or the renovations that we need while that material is still there. Once we have these renovations completed, we'll also need additional equipment to make our process more efficient so that we could turn over the compost more efficiently, such as a screener and a windrow turner, in addition to the tub grinder. So it's not as if this process is low cost at all. So those are the financial aspects of having a yard waste facility as a commercial entity in terms of the equipment necessary to make it efficient. Handling it from a municipal standpoint, we have to identify whether the town board wishes to eliminate the yard waste amnesty for the month and a half in the spring and the month and a half in the winter time or the fall time. And we could also revisit that permit to the people using the transfer stations to increase the cost of that.
Can you talk a little bit more about the amnesty program, or maybe this user fee? Because the user fee we talked about, which we haven't implemented, had to do with the fact that it's costing us a lot to get rid of recyclables that
Yes.
we're taking at no cost. There's no incentive, So there's sort of an incentive for more and more people to bring us recyclables and not regular waste where we actually get paid roughly for the cost of that material.
Weren't we gonna do a permit fee or something, Jay?
Was it?
Weren't we gonna do a permit fee or
Yeah,
like
we
something
talked
that they
about
stuck in their
having
car
done
or
it, but
something?
now I'm thinking that maybe it should also apply to people who, commercial landscapers who bring us brush or residential.
That's already in place. We have the permit and track of private carters. I think John Bouvet might be,
Oh, that
handling
falls into the
that also.
registration for waste haulers.
Yes,
Yeah.
that's 205, Section 7, and you recently adopted a town board resolution that actually modified the price schedule for the landscaper or landscapers that have smaller vehicles so that that annual permit for their vehicles was less. So I don't know if you want to increase that again, given the tub grinder cost.
And then so they pay that fee, and then, so if I hire somebody to do like yard cleanup, there is a voucher through the highway department? Is that what you're saying, that allows them to bring in my yard waste?
Yes.
And so they may charge me a disposal cost, but they're actually not paying a disposal cost. Right.
It's reimbursed through the, Len can speak more fluidly about that charge
So
back.
during that amnesty period, right, they're allowed to bring in the material free of charge, right? They can clean up all the debris from my yard, and then they go to the transfer station and they dispose of it at no cost. Is that how that works? Using a voucher from my property?
The highway department issues them a voucher after they have confirmed that the property is residential in nature and within the town of Southampton, not within the village limits, or not within the private road limits.
They
And then-
actually pay for it, Jay, in their tax bill.
So,
There's-
but it's only available outside the villages?
Yeah, I apologize. I believe they check it.
Part town.
Well, the
It's-
highway is part town, but the transfer station's whole town. So I live in the village, I'd be paying money to operate that landfill, but I wouldn't be able to get a voucher because it's through the highway department?
It's
Correct.
part of the highway leaf program pickup. The highway does not pick up in the village or the private roads. So the highway, since it's the highways program, it's only appropriate or applicable to those areas that the highway does service. The people, villages or the private roads have that ability to bring us their yard waste as residential self-haulers under the amnesty, but the waste management does not offer a voucher program. And I would not recommend doing it because it's extensively labor intensive to do it.
Yeah, that's a little bit confusing to me as a village resident, that I would be paying the same taxes toward the transfer station, but somebody outside the village would get all their leaves taken for free, but
No, but that's not how it works, Jay. No, the money for the to pay for these vouchers is levied on a part-town fund. The village residents are not paying that.
okay.
And then that part-town fund pays waste management, the enterprise fund, on a use fee
Okay.
basis. So it's accumulated.
Got
So the fact is that you may, again, be a part-time taxpayer, a part-town taxpayer, not using the service, but it's in your tax bill.
it. Okay.
I have a quick question. The vouchers, they are given to the landscaper or they're given to the property owner for a specific landscaper?
I don't know how the highway department does that, Chris, do you?
Julie, that's a highway department program, and I think that they issue it through to the homeowner with the landscaper's name on it. I believe that's how it works, but I'm not 100% sure.
Yeah.
And is it for a one-time use?
No, it's for whatever they estimate their loads to be. So usually, it's a communication between the highway department and the landscaper or the lawn care, vendor. I'm looking online right now so that I could, just read from it. So first-time voucher recipients must provide the following information. They need to provide a photo identification of the property owner, telephone number, landscape contractor's name, and phone number, and provide an address where the voucher should be mailed to. So that's a conversation about how many trips or how many yards they should be bringing. When it comes to the transfer station, our site attendants are supposed to be measuring the trucks so that we can get the cubic yard capacity of those vehicles that are incoming, so that we charge the fee associated to the actual volume coming in, assuming that they're 100% loaded. So, and we need to make sure the leaves and the branches are separate. So it's quite the process, but it's a month and a half on the springtime, and it's April 15th to the end of May. And in the fall, it's November 15th to the end of the year.
So, but how would your guys at the transfer station know that this one landscaper was still working at this one house?
They're given vouchers with the name of the property that those vouchers are issued.
Right, understood, but what stopped them from doing another property on the same voucher?
Not much.
Because there's a process where they're marked, the vouchers are marked, and then we log them, but it is something that's potentially flawed. I don't disagree with you at all, Julie, but it's the best that we have come up with between the two departments.
Understood.
So there's an additional issue here on this as well, that we have, and I've spoken with Councilman Scavone about this, that if you look and see how many vendors that we have that are licensed to operate in Southampton, it's a fairly low number. And it's hard to make that distinction. And the way we're tracking commercial going in, the same thing should apply to those other vendors to be able to assure that they're actually licensed in the town of Southampton to work, because there's a commingling of materials, and that's the hardest problem, to make that distinction between those who can and those who should and those who shouldn't. And that's one of the problems that we have a lot of times with things coming into the transfer stations, particularly the vegetative waste during these periods.
And John brings up an incredible point, because when you compare the list of carters that we've gotten through the Chapter 205 permit and track program, it's a lot more than the licensed landscape contractors are through the town. And we should meet and sit down and go through how we remedy that situation so that they're more equivalent across the board.
Yeah, and that would also help with enforcement in that regard as well, and take some of the burden off transfer staff, because an identification either by a sticker or a card or whatever that is, that way they don't have to spend a lot of time making those identifications.
Mm-hmm. Thank you.
So Chris, do you have any suggestions as to how to close the hole here, the gap?
I would suggest that maybe the comptroller's office work with us on how to come up with suggestions on that. Since they
for instance, the amnesty period, does it have to be free, or can it be heavily reduced? Could there be a yard, or per yard or per weight charge, nominal, but something?
I think that we just talked about a large budget gap. And we just talked about 3 months worth of yard waste that is essentially low cost as it is, or taxable. So I think that's a conversation that perhaps the comptroller's office should have with me. I feel put on the spot on that question because it's really like a bigger conversation with the board on mitigation of costs on this. But I do know that the tub grinder, which is the reason why we're talking about this, is the equipment that we really need.
Right now, the problem is solved temporarily. We've temporarily moved money into the fund, so we'll be able to purchase it.
You've solved it because we had record mortgage tax revenues well above our,
Yeah, but we're constantly doing other things.
Len, that has nothing, respectfully, has nothing to do with the operation of the solid waste. That money could have been used for anything, it's tax stabilization, whatever it could have been used for. It was whole town money. We're using $800,000 of it for a tub grinder. So I think yes, if we didn't have that money, what would we be doing right now to close this hole? So I think it's a fair question because it's not a business we have to be in. I agree it's important that we do this, and I'm not suggesting that we get out of doing this. I'm just suggesting that we close the hole a little bit, because with the recognition, and you said it earlier, Len, is basically if this enterprise fund doesn't do it, all the people who don't use the transfer stations are now subsidizing those that are. And I'm okay with some subsidy. As a taxpayer, I subsidize a lot of things that I don't use, but I think it's where is that, sweet spot? What is the right level of subsidy here? And maybe some years this fund will generate a surplus and it can be used for rainy days like this without having to go to other funds. But at the moment, it's not. We've got issues with recycling. We've got issues with DEC compliance. It's the perfect storm. And I'm just asking a simple question. How can we tweak the operations to reduce the subsidy a little bit?
Okay.
That is reasonable.
Let's go back to the conversation that we had during the budget process where we were talking about the permit to enter the transfer stations, and we have to come up with a palatable cost because the cost that had originally been proposed was not palatable during that conversation. We could go back to that conversation. I think the North Sea landfill solar RFP is going to go out again for a potential cost offset. We could eliminate the amnesty periods for the residents. If you want to do a lower cost, we could do the financial analysis on that. I'm just asking for assistance from the budget office in order to run those numbers because they've got a little bit more staff to help with that.
No, we will definitely run the numbers. And it's obviously budget time now already, starting in a couple of weeks. So I think the permit fee though, Christine, was my understanding last year. That was our solution. And Councilman Bouvier, I think, was supporting that we were going to charge some fee, $50 a resident or something like that. I don't know how many individual residents use.
Or something.
It kept getting pulled down for various reasons, and at some point reached a point where the cost offset out of that would be fairly minimal. I mean, there's a realistic number that you have to attach to that fee to make it work, and at those numbers, it's not going to work. But I should point out there's also another alternative here, which is part of the shared services things. And I think we should go back to the state and say, here's an opportunity for shared services. And that would be to centralize vegetative waste in one place for the East End towns where there's so much overlap. It's so hard to track. It's so difficult to manage that we do get out of the commercial business, but we work with our other towns to move that, continue to generate revenue from it, but we move that to a centralized area that's a cost sharing between all the towns. And it's a service sharing, so everybody contributes to that. I don't know if that would ever gain traction, but that's certainly one of the things listed in the shared services list of things that are potential shared services use. And if we thought that out, we could probably all of us share cost savings as a result of that. It's clear to me that the enterprise fund is not working. With the change in the recycling markets, and that we're no longer receiving those costs, and I think it's absolutely time that we at this budget cycle look into that and help correct this problem, because it's not going to go away by itself.
What is
should I mute myself now?
I'd like to chime in on this on some of the.
Can I just ask one follow-up question for John? Tommy John,
Sure.
John, your liaison to the Solid Waste Advisory Committee, have they discussed this issue about how best to start to close this gap? Have they made any recommendations in terms of fees, charges, or anything?
Well, the general sense is it's coming from a community that doesn't want to pay more for services, particularly in recycling, that we've traditionally always given for free. And so their response is, that the $35 was tolerable, acceptable, and I think we've moved ahead with that. But
We haven't actually yet.
Well, we will. I don't think we have a choice. But I would like that to be higher.
I don't think there are any plans to do that. Christine, is there any plans right now for a $35 fee?
No, during the budget process, when we talked about the fee schedule, there was a lot of inquiries on how to come a lower cost for low income areas, low income constituents. And we ran a lot of different numbers on no fee, reduced fee, and we never got consensus on what to do. So while the Solid Waste Advisory Committee may have been supportive of the lesser fee internally, and I believe those analyses were distributed accordingly, there was no consensus on that fee to move forward at that time.
Why didn't we hold a public hearing on imposing the fee, or was it part of the budget hearing?
It was part of the budget hearing.
So we could do a resolution without an additional public hearing to create a fee?
I would like to have the town attorney's opinion on that. I don't see why not. I think that the code chapter allows fees to change as the town board permits, but I would rather have the town attorney's office opine on that.
And we generally do resolutions to do those fee changes.
But no public hearing is necessary.
No.
No, and in fact, we did that for the commercial corridors. We increased those fees just recently. So it hopes that might help offset, but I don't know where we are actually with the increase in garbage and recycling materials that we continue to
I'm okay with bringing forth a resolution to impose a $35 user fee with a discount for seniors and firefighters, et cetera. And
well, that was the discount, Supervisor, and I think the analysis that I'd gotten back from our municipal waste director, Ms. Fenton, is that that would help offset some costs, but we still would not take us out of the current situation we're in. We had to offset that with general funds. I don't know what we're going to do in next year's budget, so it's a little unknown.
It's minor what we recover. I think it was maybe $20,000 or $30,000 in new revenue, which would probably cover the administrative costs of doing these things. So it's really very relatively small. And I really don't know if our prices of disposing recyclables have gone down at all, whether the markets have recovered. Chris
They have
is-
not gone down.
No, they have not.
Yeah, so are we okay with board? Is that okay if we move forward with that program? No,
I'm not quite sure what we're discussing right now. We started talking about a horizontal grinder and solid waste. Now we're into recycling and permitting fees. So I'd like to chime in on the horizontal grinder and solid waste in general, and then go over to the fees if that's possible.
I just want to get a sense.
Well, okay. I would say for the fees, a $35 fee for recycling, I am absolutely not in favor of that. I think recycling is a program that the town should be supporting, even subsidizing to get people to recycle. And I believe that we probably could do a resident, non-resident program. That's why I supported a permit kind of initiative in the first place. But I think for our town residents, we should have recycling open for free. And we should pick it up. And it's going to be the town, of course. But, that's what I believe. I also believe that solid waste is a duty of the town to provide for its residents. And if we need a tub grinder or horizontal grinder, we should get one. I mean, it's what we do. It's not necessarily a business. And I would ask the board to consider, if we did not do it, then what would happen? Our parks would be filled with brush and waste, and other things would happen. If we start adding even a small amount of money to our residents, they may find other options. So, that's where I am in this. And so what was the question, Supervisor?
Well, you've answered two of them.
Okay.
We might need to wait for, Len to weigh in on how to close the hole. You seem to have said it's okay to have the hole and subsidize the operation. I
view it as a service of the town that we're obligated to do.
Right, and we don't make.
Well, I'd like to chime in here, because the real issue here is that recycling in a lot of cases is no longer recycling. These materials are not as recyclable as a lot of people think. And because the global market has changed, they're no longer desired. And that's why we had that cost loss. But I think in principle, it's important that we continue to do that and continue to support that and in the hopes that the recycling markets will recover. So far, we haven't seen that. But I tend to agree with Councilman Schiavone that we don't want to disincentivize people from recycling, but the reality is it's not as big a contingent or a component of the revenue that is generated out of the enterprise fund as it used to be. It's quite a big drop. Now, that doesn't mean that things like cardboard and paper and other things don't generate some revenue, but it's certainly less than it ever was. And we have a global packaging issue already. There is legislation in the chute in New York State for manufacturers to take responsibility for their packaging material to aid in the recycling process, and no longer combine non-recyclable components with other things. So they'll take a responsibility for that. Will that affect our ability to continue to recycle? I certainly hope so. But we just don't know. So we're in a period of uncertainty here.
So just to expand on John's point, is the prices of disposal have not gone down, and the increases in quantity that are incoming are higher this year than they were at the same point last year. So we've gotten a lot more patronage at the town transfer stations. The paper and cardboard market has rebounded somewhat, but not to the levels that had previously existed. And that's also a month-to-month type of scenario the back end sale or valuable value of these recycled products. So I just wanted to give you that information. As we've discussed in the past, it's ever changing.
All right, thanks, Chris. So we're sort of doing, I guess, a go around on a number of issues. And I do think that, Len, if you could put together some sort of program, analysis as to a recommendation for closing some of the shortfall. Again, Councilman Scavone, I wasn't looking to close the entire shortfall. If we had an $800,000 shortfall from recycling, and this permit fee was bringing in 20 or 30,000, there was still a $770,000 shortfall. I'm just looking for something, to help the town deal with an accelerating, cost for disposing of recyclables. And look, I've never been one to say that parks should be self-sustaining, that the parks should generate enough to maintain themselves. I understand that there's a public benefit to getting people to recycle. But there are a lot of people too who don't use the town facility to do that, who hire contractors or carters, many of them who say that they recycle. Whether they do or not, I don't know. There's been some articles about this issue. So it's really up to the town board. If we don't bring in new revenue or reduce expenses, then we do end up going back to the taxpayer who is, concerned about rising costs of living in the area. So it's a tough balance. We've been elected to represent everybody and try to come up with some of these answers. So it's what we do. So we have two questions really before us. One is, do you want one of us, or me, I guess, to bring forward a resolution to create a $35 fee for users of our transfer station? And two, are we moving forward with the tub grinder? So, and it sounds like, Tommy John, you're okay moving forward with the tub grinder, but not with the user fee?
I would prefer a resident, non-resident, and charge non-residents some kind of fee, perhaps more, but not charge our residents for
A
recycling.
non-yet resident user fee. Okay, that's a possibility. We haven't.
Just to jump in on that subject, that's one of the bigger problems that we have, is to make that identification. We're understaffed in a lot of our transfer stations, and that puts a burden on those, that sometimes one employee who's running a tractor to move vegetative waste, who's trying to keep the doors open, who's trying to get the flows going through the transfer station. So, part of that, part of that is maybe an increase of $20,000, but it also comes in addition to that, in addition to of staff member or additional personnel to make sure that happens, because we don't have a tracking system like that. I know in West Hampton Beach or West Hampton, people drive in, there's no way for that attendant to know who's who. And that's one of the big problems that we have, is the ability to track, if we want to track commercial or otherwise, it's a little easier, but some commercial operations don't appear to be commercial. And, how do you do that? So you need a tracking system to do that, which was implemented with the commercial side, but making the distinction between resident and non-resident also requires, that the person go and get their permit and they have to display something. We have to produce that. We have to have an attendant to watch that. So I'm just saying that as a cautionary statement that while something sounds good on the surface, underneath are some costs associated with it.
And thank you very much, John, for bringing that up, because the permit and track code modification to include the landscapers to try and close that, to abide by our own solid waste management plan plan in place to know what is happening with waste that's generated within the town, and to use that fee to help offset the costs associated with the enterprise fund, we have overwhelmed both municipal work staff and waste management staff with the income of new vendors that are being permitted and tracked through the one administrative person at Waste Management who's handling it there, as well as Lauren, that's Joanne, and Lauren Vasilla in our office, while they're also doing their associated tasks with receiving engineering applications, receiving engineering referrals from the Department of Land Management, preparing capital budget POs. We don't have enough staff to do the back end of another permit for resident, non-resident permit on the back end, let alone the front end where the constituent goes to the transfer stations.
All right, so let's continue.
Well, while we're talking about it, I'll bring up.
Go ahead, Tommy John.
I'll bring up the Sag Harbor transfer station that certainly does service people on the East Hampton side, which is very, very close to the border, and just want to bring that up now as we're talking.
What are you saying, Tommy John?
That the Sag Harbor transfer station, it's on Bridgehampton Sag Harbor Turnpike. There are quite a few folks from the East Hampton town, but in Sag Harbor that use that transfer station.
Right, and they bring us their recyclables at no cost. Yeah, that's true.
That's
and then we pay $60 a ton to get rid of it, or whatever it is.
Right. And well, it should be noted that the transfer station itself is on a parcel that is owned by the village of Sag Harbor at no rent to the town of Southampton. So,
and by the way, East Hampton does
there's a lot going on there.
If they use the East Hampton transfer station, they have to buy a permit to use that facility. So ours, you don't have to buy a permit to use, but they also don't have a green bag program anyway. But that's a sort of a separate issue.
We have a different.
But that's an interesting point. Why are our taxpayers subsidizing East Hampton residents? So I think at the minimum we need to create some sort of permit for non-residents, non-taxpayers, or at least those.
I would also say in the village of Sag Harbor, East Hampton residents would question why Southampton Town's transfer station is on village property. That's what they're going to say. So just to, put that there as well.
So that land where our transfer station belongs to the village?
Yes.
That's correct.
Okay, don't they have some facilities on our property as well, some village operations?
No, that's actually on the same property that the impound lot that kind of was in the news a couple of years ago. And that's on the same, I think it's a 16-acre piece. But they had to come to the town of Southampton Planning Board to get approval because it is actually out of the incorporated village of Sag Harbor and in unincorporated Southampton Town, but owned by the village.
I think that was also the site that was considered in the past, I want to say maybe 4 or 5 years ago, for some public partnership to process yard waste, because there is none. There is no town yard waste facility in that area. I think that was a conversation that was had a couple of years ago.
All right.
I think that complicates the conversation, but it's there.
And then what about the tenant here? Somebody who's a renter, Tommy John, do they have to buy the non-resident fee? I mean, the house that they're renting already is paying property taxes that are subsidizing the operation. So are you just saying that people who don't actually reside within Southampton Town? Or are you saying anybody?
I don't know. I haven't thought out the particulars of whether or not that would be the case, but I'm just thinking that a fee for Southampton Town residents, personally, I think for the $35 that we're going to get, it's just going to engender bad feelings or something, with our residents. This is a program I believe that we should offer them. Recycle.
I understand. It's very minor how much we're gonna get too. So, all right, Rick, maybe we can get comments on both. It sounds like everybody wants to go ahead and buy the tub grinder.
Yeah,
We're not
I agree
clear
that,
what else to do with closing the hole. But Rick, do you want to weigh in?
yeah, the tub grinder is a definite yes for me. I think the fee schedule at the transfer stations is inevitable. $35 isn't going to get us much, and $50 really aggravated the public. So I don't know where we're going to fall on there. I think it's the opportunity to be able to get rid of your waste, to be able to recycle, to be able to bring your garbage, all those inclusive add up to something that has a worth to the public. I really like to stress the more licensing of these carters that are dumping. I think a lot of these, are picking up, my neighbor's waste and bringing it down there and paying no fee. I don't understand the process. I filled out an application for my property probably 5 or 6 years ago, and I have not filled out one since then. And they take my waste and they bring it to the dump. So I don't know if I'm on a list or they have an address, or if it's the same landscaper, he can refile every year, but we should probably look into that. And there's a good chance that maybe the amnesty should be a little shorter, or maybe there should be a nominal fee for that.
John?
Definitely for the tub grinder, and I really would like to hear from Len. How we can manage the shortfall in an intelligent way. And also considering the projections of waste and waste management that we all know, at least in the committee that I'm part of and my own research, this is not something that's going to end on its own. And I think, many municipalities have gone to, they don't operate enterprise funds anymore because it's not sustainable. That used to be based on a rigorous recycling market, which doesn't exist now. So, and I do think, I agree with Rick, there are things that we can do, small things that may add up. But, when faced with a shortfall that we just had this past year, that's a big number. And then we have equipment needs in order to manage the vegetative waste. The tub grinder is just one of them. I think the budget for municipal waste is low, personally, particularly when I look at what other municipalities spend on that. What does that mean? Ugly words, tax increase. Well, how do you do this? Nobody wants to do that. I certainly don't want to do that. But I think that there is some measure of exploitation on the use of our facilities that we can close some of that gap. It takes some creative.
Julie, you want to weigh in on this?
Sure. I think that we need the tub grinder. However, I would love to hear some information about how we can make a mulch program work. I mean, there's something called Hampton's mulch, and it's the biggest thing ever. Maybe we could have Southampton mulch. I know that there's a lot of other facets that would go into it, but maybe somebody can do an analysis to see if in the end it would make us some money. People use a lot of mulch out here. As for the fee, I think that we need some idea of who's using our transfer stations. And I don't know how we can do that and how labor intensive it is to do something like that, but I think we need that information sometime or another. I also think that the whole town is affected. If people say, I can't afford that $35 permit, I'm gonna go dump it at Good Ground Road or at the inlet. So I do think the whole town should subsidize part of the program. I'm not sure how much. Again, I would love more information. And last, I had talked to Ryan Murphy. In our rental permit, it says that the landlord, it has to either get a garbage pickup or it's left to the discretion of the renter to take the garbage off the property. In my opinion, if you're renting your house out, it's kind of like a business. And so maybe we need to just say, if you rent your house, part of the rental application is you have to get garbage pickup and not have depend on the renter to throw the garbage away. And maybe that would cut down on some of the garbage in our transfer station and make sure that it's not getting thrown somewhere else. I don't know the legalities. That Ryan and I had discussed it quickly about, can you make somebody get garbage pickup? But as a part of the permit process, rental permit process, maybe we can, and maybe that would decrease our garbage at our transfer stations.
I think there's some properties that can't get it because you can't get the garbage truck down the dirt road, but that might be just a complexity. I don't know how many properties are like that, or maybe the road isn't built for that weight of a truck kind of thing. But anyway.
Well, we did do, that, and Julie, that was originally quite a number of years ago. We looked at that. It's garbage district essentially. And there was some difficulty in identifying recycled materials, that gets to single stream waste management and that type of thing where everything's commingled. Then, there's a cost at the other end of it. And also, as the supervisor alluded to, some carters, they basically have a cost, that they don't want to exceed, and the turnaround times for some of the properties are pretty long. So you can exclude some people from that because the carters just won't serve those areas. But I don't know how big a portion of that is, but there was a lot of resistance to garbage districts, and that had largely to do with single stream waste system putting that in place.
John, I'm not talking about a garbage district. I'm talking about as part of your rental application permit. If you're renting out your house, then you have to provide garbage pickup.
Yeah, but I think part of that would be and part of the discussion about garbage districts was exactly that. And there was a sort of a rubber meets the road kind of problem that came out of that whether you could dictate to a homeowner or to a landlord that they had to do that. The only way you get around that is to establish a garbage district, because you also have to know that there may be a lot of people who just don't want to comply. They just may not want to comply at all. And that's very hard to enforce.
So just to add to that, if you don't mind, when we had first endeavored into the solid waste management update in 2011, that was later through the years modified to a point where we could approve it. There was 4 alternatives that were considered for the future of solid waste in the town of Southampton. One of the alternatives was to continue the operations, permit and track all private carters. That's what we inevitably did. The second one was to cease all solid waste operations, form the solid the curbside pickup, I'm sorry. The third was transfer stations for municipal use only and continue the compost operations, but require all the constituents to engage in private carters, and we would permit and track those private carters. So that was that's an option to consider as well.
I'm sorry, Julie, what did you say about the $35 fee? Where were you on that? You wanted to know who was using the facility, right?
Right. I think that if we have people who are not using, who shouldn't be using our facilities, to make residents pay $35 when it's not really going to do a big offset of the hole we're in, I just think we need to know who's using our facility.
When somebody from Brookhaven shouldn't be coming into Southampton town and bringing us hundreds, if not thousands of dollars worth of recyclable materials in terms of the cost of getting rid of them. That's certainly a burden our taxpayers should not have. And the only way we could do that is if we started to say, you need to be a resident of the town to use this facility. Since it's being subsidized by taxpayers, and then maybe a fee for, if we want to charge a fee for non-residents, that's something, we can consider. I know we'll have an issue with the Sag Harbor Village, East Hampton folks who, will say, no, they want to use the facility, it's convenient, but they're not paying for it. our taxpayers are. So maybe that we can resolve that again with some kind of intermunicipal agreement with the village, saying if you want your residents to go there, they're gonna, here's what you're gonna have to pay for the same privilege as Southampton. We could do that. I'm willing to explore that issue. We could hold off on the $35 fee. But we do need to come up with some way to police who's using our facility, even if they don't have to pay anything. But then we're not even covering the administrative costs of figuring out who's using our facility. So I'm sort of at a loss because it doesn't sound like there's the votes to put the $35 fee in place. So I'm not going to bring that resolution forward. But I think we have an obligation to not provide free recycling for non-residents. So we're just gonna, so maybe Chris, you and Len could work on figuring this out and get back to us. I don't really know what to say other than it doesn't sound like we have a consensus.
I would love to sit down with Len. I think without additional equipment and staff, we're not going to be able to implement the controls that you're looking to achieve. We've been trying to get a sanitation site crew leader or laborer for a while, and it's been difficult. So we're having a hard time operationally maintaining the level of service that we currently have with the shortage of staff that we are experiencing. We just had a heavy equipment operator submit a resignation that we just posted. That's a Class A licensed, difficult position to fill. I think without the proper equipment and the staff, it's going to be difficult, but I will be happy to speak to Len.
Okay.
Christina, I have a clarification. Are we buying a tub grinder or a horizontal grinder?
It's a horizontal grinder.
Okay.
Thank you.
I know we're kind of using it
Tub
interchangeably.
grinder. I think that tub grinder was on the resolution.
Excited about
It's
We
a-
asked John to revise that.
Yeah,
Make the-
we're
Not- it's
replacing
not
a tub grinder with
It's
a
not-
horizontal grinder.
It's
Sorry,
not a-
John.
It's not a tub grinder. It's a horizontal mill.
Right. But we're replacing the tub grinder with the horizontal
Yeah.
mill. So I just, so one more time, we run a lot of operations like the building department and we charge user fees. The solid waste, at least the brush operations, we're not required to operate, but we do. And I just think we need to continue this conversation about to what degree should, all the taxpayers fund an operation that some of the taxpayers use. And for many years, this was a fund that was self-sustaining. It's not anymore. And it's getting more and more, going more and more in the direction of not self-sustaining. And do we want to continue to be in this business? Or do we let the private sector handle it? If we're going to stay in it, which is what I think we should, we have to decide how much of it should be borne, the cost should be borne by the general taxpayer. What is fair and what is not fair? At what point do we say we're getting out of this business? It's just, it's too easy to just simply say, oh, we'll just raise taxes and pay for it. I think we have to have the hard conversation, which I know everybody is willing to do, and say, okay, what is the most efficient way to run this operation? What is the fairest, most responsible way to run this operation? And then make that decision. So it sounds like we've made one decision today is to go out and buy the $800,000 piece of equipment using some mortgage tax revenues that we're seeing because of an extraordinary real estate market and extremely low interest rates. That gets us past A, but it doesn't solve the fundamental problem.
Just to clarify, we're buying a wood hog to replace the tub grinder that caught on fire. which is an intrinsic piece of equipment in order to keep our operations even running, shortfall or not. I just want to make
No, I
that,
understand it. It's with just the cost to continue.
it's not a Ferrari, and it has a definite central use in municipal waste.
I understand it. To not replace the piece of equipment would be to make a decision to shut down the operation, basically.
Yeah, I just for the public's
And
information.
that's fair to phrase it in that way. Nobody wants to shut down the operation, but I'm trying to force a conversation long-term saying that this operation is getting more and more expensive and we need to be fiduciaries here and figure out, what is the fairest way to pay for it?
Absolutely. And, this has been an ongoing discussion over a period of time, and, it was brought up here. So I'll just, make the statement that we've been warning about this for for 2 years. So I do think we need to sit down sooner than later and figure out a better working model, considering that what we're seeing is we're not really seeing any changes in those elements, particularly the recycling market. But it's not just the recycling market; it's the vegetative waste that we take in huge amounts. And how do we do that? And can we generate revenue from the Hampton-based facility when it's completed? We have pressures from the DEC on our capacity and trying to limit our capacities as well, which imposes costs on us that is not something that we might otherwise have to do, but because we have this increased amount of waste that sees no end, we have to have a sit down, yesterday and talk about this and how to get this done.
There might be other things like the solar installation that can offset the costs. There was a company I know that at one point said that transfer station property could be good for communications facility, like a cell tower or something. I think there's one already in that area. Maybe that's another thing to look at. I know some people don't want those things, but everybody does want better communication, better cell signals. So that's something I guess we can look at as well. But
can I bring up
the solar array, is an RFP right now, and there's some hurdles that, we're encountering to even get that done. So, we're constantly in this pushback from various agencies. So, we're just trying to do the best that we can do. We're trying to find other alternative ways of funding things. This seems like a good one, the RFP for the North Sea Solar Array. Whether we can get through the regulatory hurdles and some of the pushback from other industries, let's hope we can do that. But it's not a given. I can't project based on something like that, but hopefully we can do that.
Christine?
No, John covered that. Thank you very much.
All right. So I think if you and Len can continue to work on, thinking outside the box, trying to figure out whether it's additional revenue generators that are, outside the traditional operation, like solar or communications facilities, and, the fee structure, those kinds of things, sellable products like mulch, like Julie mentioned.
I'd love to speak to that, just because it does go to the point. I just Googled Hampton's mulch. Thank you, Julie, for that tip. Once we get our yard waste up and running to make it efficient, like I said, we would need more equipment. The Hampton mulch is a bagged product, so we would need the equipment that goes along with bagging mulch in that manner, which is we've looked into that, but the higher priorities are getting the equipment to turn the mulch efficiently. So it's really like a long-term funded phased approach, which seems to be difficult with tax caps and doing more with less, and increased patronage to the transfer stations, increased patronage the yard waste facilities. So I think the Hamptons mulch type of product that we could prepare is a great opportunity. However, it's not an expensive endeavor.
Why do we have to bag it? Can we just sell it by the pickup truck load?
We could, if it goes to the if it goes to the degree, you'd need staff on site to be able to load those pickups if it's not the contractors shoveling it into their pickup trucks. Our heavy equipment operators push up the piles in the yard waste. They manage the yard waste. They pull the trailers from the with hauling the green bags to Brookhaven and beyond. They haul our landfill leachate. They haul the commingled containers recycled. They haul the paper. They haul the cardboard. And right now, I believe that we have 4 HEOs and 1 CEO to accomplish all of those tasks. And those all come with a Class A driver's license, which is very difficult to get. And those that have them, you want to make sure that they know how to operate our equipment, which is specialized.
All right, thanks, Chris. All right, so you and Len will have that conversation. I'm happy to participate in it, and anyone else who wants to participate in it. Meanwhile, we need to move on. John?
No, I was just signaling Len I'd like to participate in that.
All right, I'll set up a meeting for next week. I have to do it now anyway.
Right.
The deficit is growing. We're gonna have to figure out something.
Thank you.
Thanks, Len.
All right, so let's thank you, Chris.
Thank you.
And Len. Let's move on to some updates, and then we'll do executive session on acquisition, personnel, and litigation. I guess I could start. This is sort of piggybacking on the landfill issue. We had a landfill in East Quogue at Damascus Road, as you guys are all familiar with, and we've gotten quite a number of proposals for cleanup. So we're reviewing those proposals. There were 8 in total from the RFP that we did. Frank has been very involved with that, and we'll be coming back to the board soon with a recommendation. That also is a property, once cleaned up, that could be a solar array or something like that, that could generate substantial income. All right, we are also preparing documents to supply the EFC in order to receive a $1.5 million reimbursement to the CPF fund for the East Quogue Water Quality Project. As you remember, we extended water mains and connections in the East Quogue area related possibly to that Damascus Road landfill site that I mentioned, or for other groundwater contamination potential sources. So we did use the CPF fund, and we are looking for that reimbursement, which would then go directly to CPF. We are also, we're working with Councilman Martell to develop signage and stewardship plans for New York Rising properties out in Bayview Pines. And I want to remind everybody that the CRC created a website dashboard, which consolidates all online services that the town provides: permit applications, beach permit, tax payments, SOS reports, payments of Hampton Bays Water District bills, alarm billing, and parking permit ticket payments. This last weekend was Memorial Day. I hope some of you got a little downtime and also able to honor the fallen heroes. The rain definitely affected beachgoers, but the town beaches are ready. If you go to the town's website, there's a full list of beaches and recreational programs available. Also, the concerts are returning to Good Ground Park, so people should stay tuned for more information on dates and information. This is also, June 1st is technically the start of hurricane season. So I want to make sure people are keeping an eye on their weather reports in case we do have severe storms. We know that we have areas where we typically see Back Bay flooding and other issues. So we'll do our best to keep everybody informed and make sure that we're fully prepared. We did also win a decision from the appellate division related to the sand mining operation in Noyak, known as Sandland. The DEC had issued a permit to expand that facility. We challenged that permit. The state Supreme Court did not rule in our favor, but the next court, which is the appellate division, it's a 5-member judge panel, did say that the town was correct, that the permit should not have been issued based on the environmental conservation law statute that does direct the DEC not to process or grant permits in areas where the town zoning does not allow for new mining operations. So it was an interesting decision, and we are going to do what we can to make sure that that decision is enforced to the greatest of our abilities. So with that, I will turn it to you guys if there's anything else you guys want to update the board about.
So Jay, just to piggyback on your announcement with the concerts in Good Ground Park, they do start July 1st. They run through September. Kristen's put together a great slate of different bands. So it's every Thursday night going through the end of the summer. Just a reminder too that the Parks and Rec brochure is out. So the availability for camps and for other, entertainment items and things for the kids, there's plenty in the brochure. You should look that up. She has, wonderful programs for the summer. And just a reminder, the beach permits, you need a beach permit now, and there are some additional road ends where you will need that permit. I don't want to see anybody get a surprise ticket. So please, look on the Parks and Rec website, find these new areas, and, apply for your permit online.
Thank you. Anyone else?
I'm glad that you brought up Sandland, Supervisor. We've been on this for quite some time in a number of different directions. One particular one we had previously, about a year and a half ago, one decision in the appellate term when I think it was about 23 violations on this particular site were thrown out of our justice court, and we appealed that as well and won that. And so we have adjudicated, those violations. And so this one was against the New York State Department of Environmental Conservation. So, that's a big deal. And I believe they did the right thing in sticking with the wording of the statutes in New York State. And, we were victorious on this one.
Any other updates?
Yeah, can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Okay, so sorry, I got thrown off the video portion, but I'm calling in. So I did have some visual aids today that I'm obviously not going to be able to use, but I did want to just remind everybody that our active military and veteran discount card program is up and running. If you're a business and would like to participate, please contact Jamie Bowden at Town Hall or my office at the Town Council office. If you're a active military or veteran, please contact the clerk's office to get your card, and the program's growing very well.
That's great, Julie. Thank you. Any other updates? I'll just mention this. I've mentioned it before. I reached out at one point to LIPA regarding the visual benefit assessment fee, feeling like they had not adjusted their numbers to reflect lower borrowing costs for the money used to bury the power lines. If you remember, there's a number of residents who pay in their utility bills for the cost of undergrounding utilities some years ago. And LIPA, they have now adjusted their numbers, and they have agreed with the position I took, which does reduce the overall cost by about $2 million. And so based on current payments, that program will end about 2 years earlier than projected. And it'll start, I think in 2027 now, it'll drop off of people's utility bills, which is good news. Pretty much anybody east of the Shinnecock Canal is in this zone, or maybe it starts a little bit further east than that, but a lot of residents are in this visual benefit assessment area. So that's good news. And local resident actually brought the issue. Steve Abramson, some of you guys know, asked me to look into the issue, and I did. And yeah, it turned out that they hadn't adjusted their interest rate from the initial borrowing, even though they had refinanced the borrowing. So it was a good thing. All right. Anything else?
Good job. I know, when we discussed undergrounding the wires along Long Beach, a lot of the citizens, residents of Noyak were very upset about that visual benefit charge that they get on their utility bills. So thank you, Supervisor.
Thank you, Tommy John, for saying that. Yeah, so it was some good work there, and some good cooperation from LIPA too, in terms of opening up their books for us. All right, and anything else? All right, we have a couple of executive session items. We have acquisitions, personnel, and litigation. So what I'd like to do is make a motion to adjourn our work session and go into executive session on those three items. Do I have a second?
Second.
Seconded by Councilman Martell. All in favor?